Choosing a fertility clinic can be, well, it can be totally overwhelming. You're staring at this mountain of data and you're thinking, what does any of this actually mean? So today we're going to decode the most important numbers you'll ever see, the official IVF success rates that clinics have to report to the CDC.
It's really the first question every single person asks, right? You see all these lists, all these percentages, and you're just trying to make the best possible decision for your future family. I mean, it should be a pretty simple comparison, shouldn't it?
So you see this. On paper, Clinic A has a 60% live birth rate. Clinic B has a 50% rate. The choice seems like a no-brainer. Clinic A, all the way. But maybe hold on a second.
What if I told you that Clinic B might actually be the better choice for you? Yeah, that single number. It doesn't even come close to telling the whole story. The truth is, you've got to learn how to decode this data to make it truly useful. And that is exactly what we are going to do right now.
So where do we even begin to untangle all this? Well, we start with the official source, the CDC's reports on what they call Assisted Reproductive Technology, or ART. And this isn't some marketing brochure. This is standardized, legally required data from pretty much every single clinic in the country.
Now, what's really cool about this is that U.S. law actually requires nearly every IVF clinic to report their outcomes to the CDC. This whole system was designed to stop clinics from just cherry-picking their best results to show off. It creates a level playing field, giving you a trustworthy, if a little complicated, tool to compare your options. To make this way simpler, we're going to build what I like to call a decoder toolkit. So instead of getting totally lost in the report, we're going to focus on just 4 essential metrics. And these will give you the absolute clearest picture of how a clinic is performing.
First up, live births per transfer. This is probably the number you see thrown around the most. It basically tells you, once an embryo is actually transferred, what is the chance of it resulting in a baby? This metric is a fantastic indicator of how good the lab is and how skilled the doctor is at that final, crucial step. For this one, higher is definitely better.
Our second metric kind of flips the script. It's the average number of retrievals per live birth. This asks a totally different but just as important question. How many full cycles, on average, does it take to get to one live birth? This number really measures the efficiency of the entire process, from the very beginning all the way to delivery. So, and this is the key part, for this metric, a lower number is actually better.
Metric number 3 is all about context. It's the use of PGT, or pre-implantation genetic testing. This is where embryos are screened for chromosomal issues before they're transferred. You see, clinics that use PGT on a lot of their embryos are naturally going to have higher success rates because they're already selecting the embryos with the best shot. This isn't a good or a bad thing, it's just critical information to have when you're comparing 2 clinics.
And finally, our fourth metric, or, well, it was our fourth metric, it was the average number of embryos transferred. For a long time, this was a key way to see if a clinic was committed to safety because lower numbers suggest that they were focused on single, healthy births. But what's really interesting is that this specific metric was actually removed from the 2022 CDC report. Still, it's a fantastic question to ask a clinic directly.
All right, toolkit assembled. Let's get our hands dirty and dive into a real-world example to see how this all comes together. We're going to take a look at the data for a clinic called HRC Fertility in Pasadena and see how these metrics actually work in practice.
Okay, before we even look at a single number, this is the golden rule. Seriously, if you remember one thing from all this, make it this one. You have to ignore the donor egg data. Success rates with young donor eggs are almost always super high, and they tell you nothing about a clinic's scale with patients in other situations. You have to filter the report for your specific age group using your own eggs. That's the only data that really matters for your journey.
Okay, so following that rule, here's our first metric for HRC Pasadena, for patients aged 35 to 37. Their live births per transfer rate is 52%, which is nicely above the national average of 46%. So on the surface, that looks pretty solid, right? But remember our toolkit, we need more context.
And boom, here is why. A staggering 89.7%, we're talking almost 90%, of their transfers in this age group used PGT-tested embryos. Now, this doesn't take away from their great result, but it totally explains it. They are almost exclusively transferring chromosomally screened embryos, and that's a huge factor in that high success rate. See, this is the kind of context that changes everything.
So just like we saw with PGT, the data really tells a story. But to truly understand it,
we need to look at a few more critical pieces of context that don't always show up in the main report.
Think about this for a second. A world-renowned clinic might be the top choice for patients who've already failed multiple cycles somewhere else. They end up taking on the most challenging cases, and because of that, their overall success rates might actually look a little lower than a clinic that sees a less complex group of patients. It's a total paradox of success.
Here's a perfect example. A clinic that specializes in what's called mild stimulation for patients with diminished ovarian reserve has an average of 3.5 retrievals per live birth. Now compare that to HRC's 2.3. Does that make the first clinic worse? No way. Absolutely not. It just means they're treating a very different and often more challenging population. Their per transfer rate is still fantastic.
It is also so important to know that you're always looking in the rearview mirror here. The CDC tracks a cycle from the very beginning all the way to the end, from egg retrieval to a live birth, and that whole process takes time to happen and then get verified. So the data you're looking at today is always about 2 years old.
And whose data is it anyway? You know, for a large practice with a dozen doctors, the CDC report is just showing you a group average. It doesn't tell you how any single doctor is performing. But for a smaller, single doctor practice, those numbers are pretty much that one doctor's personal track record.
And that leads us right into a classic statistical trap. If a clinic only has a few patients in your age group in a given year, the percentages can get wacky and be really misleading. I mean, 3 patients with 3 successes is a 100% success rate. 3 patients with 0 successes is 0%. Neither of those numbers is really a reliable predictor of what will happen next.
So after all this, what's the big takeaway? Well, the goal isn't to find a winner based on one single percentage. The real goal is to use this data to arm yourself with much, much smarter questions when you have your consultation.
And here it is, your cheat sheet. Number 1, always filter for your age and your egg source. 2, look at both the efficiency, the retrievals per live birth, and that final stage success, the live births per transfer. 3, use PGT rates for context. And 4, remember, the beta is old and it represents the whole clinic, not necessarily your specific doctor. The source author suggests that if 2 clinics look pretty similar, a difference of more than 15% in a key metric might be meaningful enough to ask about.
Because ultimately, the CDC report isn't an answer key. It's more like a study guide. It prepares you to walk into that consultation and move beyond just what are your success rates to asking, okay, but why are your success rates what they are? The data gives you the power to start a much more meaningful conversation. So the real question is, what will you ask?